Today our subject is self-expression through language. In other words, writing.
Please note that this entire video is not going to be out here where all the birds and stuff are chirping, but I'm trying to set the scene here, or the mise en scène. I want to ask you a question. To me, it's very serious, but to you, it might not actually be all that serious. Where are you from? You're like, what in the world? How is that even serious? In writing, it's actually very serious, because there are certain things that you tend to see, or believe, or think that actually come from a very specific place. And in that place, you work, you move, you filter things through. So when I ask you, where are you from? There's the literal, I'm from Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Back home again in Indiana.
Or wherever it is that you're from. But then there's also the metaphorical.
Holy mother-forking shirt balls. This is the bad place.
I'm not in a good place, man. Well, where is that place? What does that look like? Is that depression? Is that anxiety? Is that fear, hatred, sadness, jealousy? What do you mean when you're in a bad place? It's at these moments that we actually live inside our minds, or we live inside our depression or anxiety. And it can seem like it's way too hard to get out. Like we're stuck in a locked room or a cell and we can't escape. That's one way. So we have a literal and metaphorical. And we also have an ideological. Where are you from, ideologically? An ideological place is something a little bit harder to define and harder to understand, harder to identify. It's a place where we actually live out how we view the world and what we see and how we respond and what we're actually thinking about it. That is something we call worldview. Back at it again at Krispy Kreme. So worldview. A worldview is how you perceive the world around you. So if I were to say something like the Democrats or the Republicans, there's probably something in your brain that lights up that's either positive or negative depending on which point of view you take. It's these myths, these stories, these ideas that we wrap ourselves around and then we build off of those things. For instance, you've probably heard the term bias, and you're going to have to write about bias later on in another paper, but right now it's to examine where does bias come from? How is it embedded in what you think? There's no way to get rid of bias, but there is a way to examine where it comes from and why you take the particular views you take, which is why place is so important. Think about it in terms of how you speak. Is it mountain or mountain? Is it drawer or drawer? Is it soda or pop? That's just an examination of language and how place influences language, but place also influences how we act in general. Think Southern hospitality.
Dirty South mind blown, dirty South bread. Catfish fried up, dirty South bed.
For a lot of people, where you are is tied to a culture. When I lived in Chicago, Chicago had pockets throughout the city. You had Little India and Chinatown and Polish Village and all these different places where people congregated together because they had shared experiences, values, and culture. It's like that way with writing. A lot of times you'll find voices in your sources that agree with you, or you'll find things that disagree with you, but disagree with you in a very stupid way, where it's really easy to argue against them because they don't even know the position anyway. So what we're talking about here with place is examining how those ideas start to form in your brain. Where does it come from? Why do we fear the certain people we fear, or hate the certain people we hate, or love the certain foods that we love, and love the certain people we love? Why do we do things the way that we do? And so when you write, you have your own particular style that's influenced by how you interact with place and where you grew up and where you live currently. I think about how James Baldwin explained this to Dick Cavett a long time ago.
When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only, one reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong, I might have gone to Timbuktu, I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than it already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You have to be able then to turn off all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody. I don't know what most white people in this country feel, but I can only include what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church which is black. I know, as Malcolm X once put it, that the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means that I can't afford to trust most white Christians and certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is anything against black people, but I know the real estate lobbies keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks they give my children to read and the schools that we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
James Baldwin communicates several interesting concepts that come from place. One of them is that when he was in the United States, he felt paranoid and couldn't figure out exactly what it was. Then when he went to another place, to Paris, he realized that it wasn't just his own paranoia. It was the day-to-day interaction with consistent and horrible racism. And that racism and that fear propelled his thinking. And then when he left and went to Paris and was able to relax and able to absorb culture in a way that he wanted, he was able to allow that to influence how he wrote. The same thing that he examines when he comes back is the idea that you judge institutions or people in those institutions by what they surround themselves in. Who is there? What is there? Why is it there? And that informs his decision as to what is trustworthy, who he can be, and what others around him expect of him. Because what he sees around him in his surroundings determines whether or not he feels safe or able to express himself fully or able to communicate the truth to people who really need to hear it. When you start to think about how place informs what you think, you start to notice something about yourself.
And then I'm flipping through the channels, and one of the channels is a public broadcasting. And on this grainy show, somebody's holding up a comic book page. I went, whoa, comic books! And then it got better. The page they were holding up was from the Uncanny X-Men. The guy holding it is John Byrne, the artist. And then he says the magic words. I live here in Calgary. The guy who draws the best-selling comic book lived in the same city I did as a Canadian kid? That was the moment. I went, wow, if he can live in Calgary, then it's doable. And I put my head down, that was it.
Todd McFarlane, the creator of Spawn and all those really cool figurines that you see in malls of your favorite sports icons or musicians of some sort, discussed in detail how place influenced how he pursued comic book writing. Because before, he didn't believe it was possible for someone who lived in the place that he was at. For you, it might be the same way. You might feel that it's impossible for someone who came from your background or your family or your location can write well enough to be noticed and to be cared for and given the space to share their ideas, no matter how crazy you think they might be, and still receive recognition, praise, and feel that what you've said has been truly and fully understood and heard. I am a first-generation college graduate. I had a whole bunch of opportunities with Upward Bound and all these really cool institutions that provided ways for me to see that just because where I came from or who I am is no way going to hold me back from something. It actually informs how I get there. because where you come from doesn't hold you back. It actually presents you with a great new roadmap to encounter the same information that other people do and the same situations that other people do, and learn how to navigate them differently and create differently and provide new ways of seeing that people who have been in the same place over and over and over again, and who listen to the same voices over and over and over again, when they encounter yours from the particular place or perspective that is yours and yours alone, they will encounter something inspiring.